And I think that's what drew me in, is when you're celebrating the art of the tease or the art of the ecdysiast arts or burlesque, you're really celebrating your own body and the vehicle you live in.
Danielle Colby was never just the woman behind the counter at Antique Archaeology. From her first appearance on American Pickers, she stood out because there was nothing ordinary about her story. She grew up as a Jehovah's Witness in Iowa, eventually walked away from that life, built a career in burlesque, and somehow became one of the most recognizable faces on History Channel. But the biggest surprises came after the cameras started moving away from her. So what really happened to Danielle Colby after American Pickers? Join us as we uncover the story behind her life after the show. The woman nobody expected and the show she made her own. Danielle Colby did not arrive on American Pickers with any conventional television credentials, and that was precisely the point. She had grown up in Davenport, Iowa, in a strict Jehovah's Witness household where modesty was expected, personal expression was tightly governed, and the outside world was treated with caution. Her parents had been what she described as hippies before finding the faith in what she called a drug-induced haze. And the swing from that liberal household into 3 times a week church attendance and regular door-knocking field service created the kind of tension that either breaks people or produces someone incapable of living an ordinary life. Danielle became the latter. After leaving the faith as an adult, she built a life in Chicago that operated as a deliberate inversion of everything her childhood had demanded. She started dancing at 12 after encounters with burlesque performers, including Margaret Cho, and a performer known as Satan's Angel, and the art form stayed with her long enough to become the organizing principle of her adult professional identity. She founded Burlesque Le Moustache, a 9-person performance troupe that toured eastern Iowa and western Illinois, then opened Danny Diesel's Bump and Grind Academy in Chicago as a formal school for aspiring burlesque dancers. She was also part of an all-female roller derby team until injuries ended that chapter. She ran a vintage clothing shop. She collected antiques with the seriousness of someone who understood what she was handling. And through all of it, she built a friendship with Mike Wolfe that eventually placed her in front of the cameras at Antique Archaeology when American Pickers launched in January 2010. The show made her a recognizable face to millions of viewers who had never encountered burlesque or vintage fashion or the overlap between antique collecting and performance art that Danielle embodied so completely. And the audience responded to her with genuine affection that television cannot manufacture. She was not playing a character. She was exactly who she appeared to be: opinionated, warm, visually striking, and deeply committed to the things she cared about. The tattoos covering her arms were partly designed by her own children, her son drawing a circle on one hand and her daughter drawing a heart on the other, which tells you everything about who she is when the cameras are not pointing at her. Each piece, she has said, exists for a very specific reason. Her role on American Pickers was never glamorous in the conventional sense. She managed the Antique Archaeology store in LeClaire, Iowa, handled the administrative side of a business that the television cameras made into a destination, and appeared across more than a dozen seasons as the person who kept everything running while Mike and Frank were on the road. She was the anchor. What she built alongside the show was something entirely separate: a performance career, a community of students and fellow artists, and a public identity that operated in spaces the show never fully entered and never fully understood. And when the health challenges started arriving, the whole balance she had maintained required a very serious renegotiation. What did the years of managing that balance at a relentless pace actually cost her physically? And why did the bills arrive all at once? The first time she had to stop. The health story that reshaped Danielle's life most immediately began in 2022, when she revealed publicly that she had been dealing with uterine fibroids that she described as incredibly painful, causing disruptions to her cycle and her daily life severe enough that they could not simply be managed around or pushed through. Her doctor recommended a hysterectomy, and Danielle underwent the procedure in 2022, a decision she was open about with her audience even as she declined to make it a prolonged public drama. The recovery period pulled her away from American Pickers long enough to affect her presence in season 24, and the creative block that followed the surgery was something she addressed honestly. She told fans the whole situation had left her feeling unmotivated creatively for a period, which is a kind of admission from someone whose creative output had always been relentless. She overcame it with the support of her family and her then-fiancé Jeremy Shush. But the fibroids were not the end of the health story. They were, as it turned out, the beginning of a chapter that had several more difficult pages in it. In December 2023, a different and far more alarming situation announced itself through pain that was almost impossible to ignore. After suffering intense pain across her face, jaw, ear, neck, arm, and hand on her right side, Danielle was diagnosed with trigeminal neuralgia, a condition that causes chronic severe pain through nerve compression and is considered one of the most acutely painful disorders in all of medicine, triggered in her case by a tumor in her face. She underwent surgery to remove the tumor, which significantly reduced the pain she had been experiencing. Trigeminal neuralgia is sometimes called the suicide disease because of how severe and unrelenting the pain can be, which makes the fact that Danielle was managing it while still maintaining her performance schedule, her television commitments, and her engagement with her audience a testament to the stubbornness that her fans had always recognized in her. She mentioned what was necessary about her medical situation, addressed the questions her audience was asking, and kept moving. Neither the hysterectomy nor the tumor diagnosis became a storyline she exploited for sympathy. They were things that happened and things she dealt with, in the specific matter-of-fact way she approaches most of what comes at her. Which is exactly why what happened in December 2024 hit her audience differently. Because for the first time, she genuinely stopped. The social media disappearance nobody fully explained. On December 9th, 2024, Danielle posted to Instagram to cancel all upcoming burlesque performances for the foreseeable future, and the statement she offered was deliberately incomplete in ways that told its own story. She explained that there were very serious health issues happening within her family, and that she did not want to go into detail, clarifying that it was not her own health she was speaking of. She said she would continue traveling for American Pickers, but would not be performing until things balanced out, and she asked fans to send prayers and healing thoughts toward her family, without identifying who the illness involved or what it was. The announcement landed in a fan community that had been watching Danielle navigate health challenges for 2 consecutive years, and the deliberate privacy she maintained around the family situation created a wave of concern that she spent the following weeks managing carefully from a distance. Then, in January 2025, something unexpected happened that extended her absence from social media in a way that had nothing to do with health. In the days surrounding Donald Trump's inauguration, Danielle hinted that her social media accounts might be going dark, and shortly after, both her Instagram and her OnlyFans accounts were deactivated. She had never been shy about her political views. Her advocacy work in Puerto Rico, her support for marginalized communities, her feminist perspective on performance and art all placed her clearly in a specific part of the political landscape. And whatever her reasoning was for stepping back from her platforms at that moment, the practical effect was weeks of absence from the social media presence she had built over years. Both accounts eventually came back, and when she returned to Instagram, fans flooded the comments with relief and excitement, with many asking about the museum project she had been developing before everything went quiet. The return was warm, and the audience was clearly just glad she was back, which itself reflects the specific quality of the relationship she has built with the people who follow her. Less celebrity-fan dynamic and more community. The kind of connection where an absence feels personal. In April 2025, she finally addressed what had been happening to her personally during the difficult period. On Instagram, she posted a photo of herself in a costume and wrote that the last time she had worn that costume, she had been in very bad health. That the night in the photo had been extremely painful and frightening, and that she had survived it and could not wait to wear it again with more confidence and peace. She gave no medical specifics, and she did not need to. The language of someone describing a frightening physical experience they made it through communicated everything her audience needed to understand. And the response in the comments was immediate. Hundreds of people who had been watching and waiting, telling her how glad they were she was still there. But her life after American Pickers wasn't only about what happened to her health. What she chose to do publicly created an entirely different kind of controversy. The OnlyFans backlash. No conversation about what Danielle Colby has been doing after American Pickers is complete without addressing the part of her life that generates the most outside commentary. Her OnlyFans account, her burlesque content, and the kind of criticism that follows a woman in her late 40s who is also a History Channel television personality and who has decided that those two identities are not in conflict. Danielle launched her OnlyFans as an extension of her burlesque career, treating the platform the way she treats the stage, as a space for the kind of performance art she has been developing since she was 12 years old. She also maintains a Patreon where subscribers get access to behind-the-scenes content, performance footage, and personal updates. The combination of these platforms has generated a subscriber base that reflects the depth of investment her audience has in her as an artist. And it has also generated the predictable wave of criticism from people who believe that someone who appears on a family-accessible television show should make different choices about their body and their art in their private life. Danielle's response to that criticism has been entirely consistent across the years. She does not particularly engage with it. The woman who grew up in a household where her body and her expression were subject to institutional oversight left that world behind, specifically because she rejected the premise that other people's comfort should govern her choices. The tattoos, the burlesque, the OnlyFans, the nude photos posted to her Instagram with strategic editorial coverage, all of it reflects the same underlying position, which is that she is an adult artist with full authority over her own image and her own art. And that authority does not become negotiable because a television network also happened to put her on camera. Her fashion work on the platform incorporates recycled and vintage materials, connecting her collecting background to her performance identity in a way that is more coherent than her critics typically acknowledge. And the community she has built through both Patreon and OnlyFans is one that she actively uses to promote fellow artists, support burlesque performers who do not have the platform she has, and fund advocacy work. The History Channel has never publicly addressed the OnlyFans, which is itself a statement. Season 27 of American Pickers premiered in 2025 with Danielle in her ongoing role, which tells you everything you need to know about how much the network's discomfort with her choices, if any exists, outweighs the value she brings to the show. But while the controversy kept people talking, Danielle was quietly working on something far more personal: the legacy she is building in Davenport. While the health crises were unfolding and the social media situation was being navigated and the OnlyFans debate was running in the background, Danielle was quietly building something that had been living in her imagination for years. The Enthusiast Arts Museum is a nonprofit institution dedicated to the history of burlesque and striptease performance, built from Danielle's own extensive personal collection of costumes, artifacts, and archival materials accumulated across decades of performing and collecting. The word enthusiast, a formal term for a striptease performer coined by journalist H.L. Mencken, is itself a statement about how Danielle frames what she does. The museum approaches burlesque the way antique archaeology approaches vintage objects, as things the world has undervalued and that deserve someone willing to argue for their significance. The Enthusiast Arts Museum opened on June 21, 2025, at 322 Brady Street in downtown Davenport, Iowa, with Danielle teaching burlesque and movement classes on Thursdays and Sundays as part of the programming. The opening came approximately 6 months after the December 2024 family crisis had forced her to cancel everything, which means the museum launched during what was, by Danielle's own account, one of the more physically and emotionally demanding periods of her adult life. She announced it in April 2025, got the doors open in June, and headlined the Ohio Burlesque Festival in Cleveland in August. The pace of that recovery from whatever she had been through privately is remarkable. The museum was built from a personal collection that Danielle had been assembling across her entire performing career, including a period she spent in Puerto Rico studying the origins of Latin burlesque, while simultaneously doing hurricane relief work in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma, building houses, fundraising, and working with local leaders on reconstruction strategy. The specificity of that combination, archival research and disaster relief in the same trip, is entirely consistent with how she operates. She does not do one thing at a time. The marriage happened in February 2024, an intimate ceremony in Kanab, Utah, with Jeremy Shush, a photographer who had been her partner since 2014 and her fiancé since 2020 when she proposed to him on her birthday during a burlesque performance and posted the proposal video to Patreon for her subscribers. They had been together for a decade by the time they married. The ceremony was attended by the family and close friends who had been her support system through the years of medical difficulty that immediately preceded it. And Danielle's Instagram post announcing it was characteristically direct. She said she had finally made an honest man out of her king, after almost 6 long years. She has 2 children from previous relationships, her daughter Memphis and her son Miles, both of whom have grown up inside the ecosystem their mother inhabits, which is why it is not entirely surprising that Memphis has also developed her own presence in the burlesque world. Danielle's relationship with her children has been one of the consistent warmths in a public life that has navigated a great deal of difficulty. And the tattoos her children designed for her hands are the most visible evidence of how that warmth sits at the center of everything else she does. But after everything Danielle had been through, what did her life actually look like when American Pickers returned? The show, the season, and where she actually stands now. By the time season 27 of American Pickers premiered in 2025, Danielle Colby had been through a hysterectomy, a trigeminal neuralgia diagnosis, and tumor removal surgery, a mystery family health crisis that stopped all her performances, a social media blackout that alarmed her audience, a marriage, a museum launch, and a return to the burlesque stage as a festival headliner. She had also been absent from season 26, which had already been dealing with the weight of Frank Fritz's death and the ratings challenges that came with it. And her return to season 27 was one of the continuity points the show could point to as it tried to rebuild momentum. American Pickers was confirmed to continue into season 27 and beyond, with Mike Wolf, Robbie Wolf, and Danielle as the core cast, and the season brought her back to Antique Archaeology in a role that had grown more significant than it might have appeared from the outside. What is most striking about where Danielle Colby has landed in 2025 and 2026 is how completely she has built a life that exists independently of the television show that introduced her to a national audience. American Pickers gave her visibility on a scale she could not have generated independently. Everything she has done with that visibility has been entirely her own. The Enthusiast Arts Museum in Davenport represents the most complete expression of what Danielle Colby is actually about. Not the antique shop, the television show, or even the stage performances themselves, but the serious and committed preservation of a history that most of the world has not taken seriously enough. A woman who grew up in a Jehovah's Witness household in Iowa, left that world, built a performance career in Chicago, survived 2 significant health crises in 3 years, married the partner she had been with for a decade, opened a museum dedicated to an art form she has practiced since childhood, and returned to headline a festival. That is the real story of what happened to Danielle Colby after American Pickers. Did you know about everything Danielle Colby was managing behind the scenes while still showing up for American Pickers? And does the Enthusiast Arts Museum feel like the most authentic version of what she has always been building toward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.